Meet Jonathan Bird, one of the world's top underwater nature cinematographers. Traveling the world on assignment for all the major networks, he is an Emmy Award-winning authority on the underwater world. In freshwater or salt, reefs, wrecks, or caves, Jonathan documents the world beneath the waves. Welcome to the Blue World.
Manta rays are among the ocean's most majestic animals. And while I've seen a few manta rays in my travels, I've never seen a manta ray feeding frenzy, something that happens during a specific time of the year at a remote atoll in the Indian Ocean. So I've come here to Ba Atoll in the Maldives for the adventure of a lifetime. The Maldives are a group of islands in the middle of the Indian Ocean, just southwest of India's southern tip. They're made up of thousands of coral atolls dotting the tropical blue water. Here you can see everything from a traditional local fisherman in a rowboat with a single fishing pole to the hustle and bustle of water taxis around the capital city of Mali. I'll be exploring the Maldives aboard a luxury dive yacht capable of traveling hundreds of miles between atolls to find the best dive sites. I'm brought aboard by a small boat called a dooney that will cruise alongside us. We'll use the dooney as our diving platform. Soon we set sail for Ba Atoll, and the captain drives the boat not with a gigantic steering wheel, but a tiny joystick. We leave the busy capital behind and cruise out into open water. Although the boat has diesel engines, she gets a helping hand from favorable winds. The next morning, our dive master Shah gives us a short lecture on what to expect and how we're going to find the mantas. Once our gear is aboard the dooney and the captain ready to head out, we climb aboard and they shove off from the mother ship. Time to go looking for manta rays. We navigate between the shallow reefs and sandy lagoons on our way to a place called Hanafaru Bay. There are 20 divers on this expedition, and we're suited up and ready to go. Shah is watching for mantas from the top deck. We pass idyllic beaches on enchanting uninhabited islands. Hanafaru Bay turns out to be not much more than a ring of coral reefs surrounding a shallow sandy seafloor. It's not really a bay at all. Shah doesn't see anything resembling a manta, but we decide to go check it out anyway. I suit up, keeping my expectations high. Well, this is it. Hanafaru Bay. Let's go see if we can find some manta rays. The reefs around the outside of Hanafaru Bay are gorgeous, filled with colorful corals and schools of fish. But the sandy bottom of the bay is fairly featureless. And there are no mantas. I wait for a while, looking up for manta shapes, but nothing swims over. Mantas only come here when the tides are just right because plankton accumulates in the bay. Well, no mantas. You know, they tell me there can be like 50 or 100 mantas in this bay, but so far we haven't seen any. I guess we'll try again tomorrow. As the sun sinks below the horizon, I can only wonder what tomorrow will bring. I sure hope I didn't come all this way for nothing. The next morning, we're off again to look for mantas. Dive masters Shah and Shumi are on top of the boat scouring the water for shadows. They want to find the mantas just as badly as we want to see them. We approach Hanafaru Bay with bated breath.
There's one. Look at there.
Shumi's keen eyesight has caught a shadow a few hundred yards away in the middle of Hanafaru Bay. As we get closer, we realize there are at least a dozen mantas swimming around at the surface. Who knows where they were yesterday, but today they're here. So, without wasting any time, we get ready to go into the water. Some of our group is going to try snorkeling with them, which is probably a better way to keep up. To shoot steady footage, I really need to get down away from the surface waves, so I'm going to use my scuba gear. I hit the water and immediately a manta turns and comes towards me, flying like a huge bird with a 10-foot wingspan right over my head. These strangely shaped animals are relatives of sharks. They have no swim bladder and they sink if they stop swimming. So, just like gigantic underwater birds, they flap their wings to move and stay up off the bottom. Even though their mouths are open wide, these animals present no threat to people. They eat only plankton. They catch the plankton by swimming with their mouths wide open and funneling extra water in using two special fins in front of their mouth called cephalic lobes. Looking down into a manta's throat, you can see the gills. The water goes back out through the gills, but the plankton gets caught on comb-like filters. So a manta ray is like a big swimming strainer that filters out all the tiny planktonic bug-like animals in the water. As I watch them feed, I can see their massive gill slits underneath where the water comes back out. While some mantas like to swim along the surface to feed, others find a good spot filled with plankton and do barrel rolls, filtering the same cloud of plankton over and over until they've gotten most of it. This pair of mantas feeds in formation. I have no idea if this helps them feed more effectively, if it's just a coincidence, or maybe they're just pals. The mantas don't seem to mind me at all. At first I thought that maybe they were so busy feeding that they didn't notice much, but sometimes it seems like they're actually coming by on purpose to give me a look. The water is filled with tiny silvery fish that are also feeding on the plankton. They swim through my frame like a cloud of silver, dangerously near the mantas' mouths, but fast enough to avoid the hungry mantas. As the sun gets lower in the sky, the tide is turning and conditions for feeding become less ideal. The mantas start to wander off into the open ocean.
Man, that is what we came for. Dozens of manta rays all feeding at the same time with the tide going out. Amazing to see with all their mouths wide open and zooming back and forth. Woohoo, man, that was awesome.
After 10 days at Hanafaru Bay, I only saw the feeding frenzy on 3 occasions when conditions were just right. But those magical few hours I spent in the water with the mantas were worth every bit of the trouble in traveling all the way to the Maldives. Once again, I have been fortunate to witness a stunning performance of nature in the shallow waters of the Blue World.
Don't go away. Jonathan travels to an uninhabited island in Indonesia to find thousands of sea snakes.
Some of the world's richest coral reefs thrive in Indonesia. Located in the middle of the so-called Coral Triangle, the diversity of species and colors of Indonesian reefs absolutely amazes me every time I get the chance to dive here. This time, however, it's not the reefs I've come to film, but a remote and uninhabited island whose waters are reputed to teem with thousands of sea snakes. The island, known as Manuk, is an active volcano 100 kilometers from the nearest inhabited island, smack dab in the middle of the Indonesian archipelago. Getting there is no easy task. I've chartered the Seahorse, a traditional Indonesian pinisi built for divers, for a special itinerary to reach Manuk Island. Dive Master Jandri meets me at the marina in Sorong. It took me 2 full days of flying just to get to Sorong from the United States. He takes me out to the Seahorse, my home away from home, for the next 2 weeks. This expedition will take 14 divers 1,200 miles across the Banda Sea, from Sorong to Alor, stopping to dive along the way at many islands. The most important of which, of course, is Manuk. I board the Seahorse, and once everyone else has arrived, we pull anchor and head for the open sea in search of some serious underwater adventures. The next morning, we reach our first dive site in Raja Ampat. I can hardly wait to hit the water and get a look at the spectacular reefs. Raja Ampat is the most biologically diverse area in Indonesia, and therefore the world. As I roll into the water and get my camera, the first thing I see is a wonderfully healthy, shallow, hard coral reef. Nearby are sea fans sheltering tiny fish. Along the drop-off, larger schools of fish hunt, swirling around the reef. In the deep blue, a school of spadefish regard me without fear as I swim among them. Back at the reef, a camouflaged fish lies on the sand between the coral heads. It's a crocodile fish, an ambush predator waiting for prey to come close. Even its eye has camouflage. Later in the day, I suit up once again for another mind-blowing experience. This is a dive on a tiny seamount, a coral pillar that would be a small island if only it were a tad taller. This underwater tower is the home of the largest school of butterfly fish I've ever seen. They hover here in the strong current, apparently feeding on something that the current brings to them. They don't seem to mind my presence at all. It's a mesmerizing experience to dive within the school, enveloped on all sides by colorful fish. Exhausted by swimming in the current, I relax and drift away from the seamount. I float gently towards the surface where I make a short safety stop for decompression. Finally, I head back to the Seahorse, my first day of diving done. A beautiful day leads to a beautiful sunset, and I can't wait to see what tomorrow brings. For 5 days, the pilot of the Seahorse advances us across Indonesia from island to island, with wonderful diving every day. But my mind is focused on one particular spot. And today, at last, we have arrived, Manuk Island. The island is aptly named. Manuk means bird in several Indonesian dialects, and birds it has. Manuk is completely uninhabited, and there are a few reasons why. First of all, it's kind of steep, but more importantly, it's an active volcano. There are steam and sulfur vents all over the island. Standing downwind, you can smell the distinct odor of brimstone. But the big question is, are there any sea snakes here? I depart for the first dive with my fingers crossed that I will see tons of sea snakes.
So, let's go check it out.
When I get down to the reef, I see a wonderfully healthy ecosystem with beautiful coral, abundant fish, and crystal clear water. You couldn't ask for a nicer place to do a dive. The walls drop off steeply into deep water. The reef looks perfectly healthy except for this, an underwater volcanic vent. Toxic gases and heat are coming out of the seafloor. Coral can't grow too close to this vent. The water is murky and the rocks are stained yellow. Whatever I'm swimming in right now is probably not good for me or my camera. Up in shallow water, volcanic bubbles are percolating out of the seafloor. Nothing will grow on these rocks either. The volcanic nature of Manuk Island is everywhere. Yet, among the volcanic bubbles swims a sea snake. It is apparently unaffected by the water quality. It swims casually by flapping its flattened paddle-like section of tail. I follow it down onto the reef, mesmerized by its swimming. Sea snakes are among the most venomous animals on Earth. They use this venom to hunt, and fortunately, attacks on people are extremely rare. Soon I start to see other sea snakes, and I realize that more and more have been appearing. Were they here before and I didn't see them, or did they come out from someplace? Clearly, some were sleeping. This one's taking a nap in plain view on the reef. I guess they don't really have to worry much about predators. I watch this one sleep for a little while and I start to wonder if it's even alive. So I give it a little tickle. I wouldn't do this with a land snake, but sea snakes are very easygoing, almost mellow, and rarely aggressive. The snake just moves a couple of feet away and goes back to sleep. Pretty soon I notice that as the snakes are waking up, they're coming over to check me out. Are they curious? They investigate my fins and gear. They swim closely around me. I know they're not aggressive, so I just try to stay still and not frighten them. Look, they're so mellow I can hold one. Notice how it flicks its tongue. Like land snakes, this is how a sea snake smells. But at the same time, the tongue flicking helps get rid of excess salt from glands in its mouth. Because sea snakes are reptiles just like land snakes, they have lungs and need to breathe air just like people. So a sea snake must head to the surface every once in a while for a breath. Sea snakes have a huge lung that takes up nearly the entire length of their body, so they can hold a big breath that will last for a while. Each time a sea snake surfaces, it usually spends a minute or two resting and breathing before gulping in that last big breath and diving back down to the reef. A breath can last 1 to 2 hours depending on the species, but most sea snakes breathe more often than that unless they're sleeping. They can also absorb a little bit of oxygen from the water directly through their skin, which helps them extend their dives. As I ascend from my last dive of the day, I'm really excited about all the sea snakes I saw.
Wow! That dive was snake-tacular! I've seen sea snakes before, but never that many.
The next morning, I'm up at sunrise and heading out to the reef for an early morning dive. Early morning is when the sea snakes hunt, and I'm hoping to witness the reef alive with sea snakes on the prowl. Underwater, the light levels are still low, and I'm heading out to a deep seamount where I saw a lot of sea snakes yesterday. This should be a good place to find some sea snakes hunting. When a sea snake hunts, it takes advantage of having a small head and a thin body to go from hole to hole in the reef, poking its head inside. It hopes to corner a fish or an invertebrate that's hiding in the hole. Once the hunting starts, more sea snakes start coming into the reef to join the hunt. On this seamount, more than 100 feet from the surface, dozens of sea snakes are gathering to prowl the reef for food. Sometimes they appear to work together to make sure nothing escapes. My time is limited at such a deep site, and all too soon I must head for shallower water. There are more sea snakes in the shallows. Sure, I've seen sea snakes before, but why are there so many here at Manuk Island? Is it the remoteness of the place, far from people? Is it a lack of some other predator? For now, nobody's quite sure. But there's no doubt about it. Manuk might be named after the birds, but to me, it will always be the Island of the Snakes.
Meet Jonathan Bird, one of the world's top underwater nature cinematographers. Traveling the world on assignment for all the major networks, he is an Emmy Award-winning authority on the underwater world. In freshwater or salt, reefs, wrecks, or caves, Jonathan documents the world beneath the waves. Welcome to the Blue World.
Sharks are perhaps the most misunderstood animals in the ocean. In spite of the fact that people are only very rarely attacked by sharks, they suffer with a bad reputation. While the world's largest shark, the whale shark, is known to be harmless to people because it's a filter feeder, other sharks have been known to attack people occasionally. The tiger shark and the white shark are two of the largest so-called man-eaters, and they have an equally large bad reputation for being extremely dangerous to people.
But what if I told you that these are not the most dangerous sharks? In fact, the most dangerous shark in the world is probably the bull shark.
It might seem hard to believe. The bull shark looks just like a reef shark, but a little bigger. It doesn't seem all that intimidating. So what's the big deal? As it turns out, bull sharks are responsible for more documented attacks on people than any other species of shark. In 1916, there were several people killed by one or more sharks off New Jersey in the span of 2 weeks. At the time, most people suspected a great white shark, but one of the attacks occurred more than 10 miles up a river, and white sharks have never been known to venture that far from the ocean. It's much more likely that the attack came from a bull shark.
The bull shark is the only species of shark that regularly moves between saltwater and freshwater. In fact, it's been caught by fishermen more than 500 miles up the Mississippi River in Illinois.
Shark attacks are rare, and most often they're believed to be a case of mistaken identity, since attacks on swimmers often occur in shallow, silty water where the shark has a hard time seeing its prey clearly. Nonetheless, bull sharks are considered extremely dangerous animals under some conditions.
Which is why I was so excited when my friend Jorge Loria from Phantom Divers in Playa del Carmen invited me to come film these sharks. He's hand feeding them.
I fly on down to Mexico, landing in Cancun, then heading south to Playa del Carmen, a beach lover's paradise and my favorite place in the world for cenote diving. But this time I'm not diving the cenotes. I'm heading out to a secret dive site in the ocean, hopefully filled with sharks. Big sharks! I make my way over to Phantom Divers to meet my old buddies Jorge and Charlie.
Hey, Jorge, Charlie, how you doing? You guys ready to film some sharks?
Charlie and Jorge have been feeding bull sharks for a few years, and they give me a few tips on what to expect and the best way to film it.
All right.
And of course, some safety tips.
But what is very important, never lose of sight that bait. You know?
Okay.
Don't have the bait and be looking this way.
Right.
You gotta be looking at the bait the whole time.
Right.
Okay, because it could be that a shark comes for the other way.
Right.
Usually they come from the front.
My wife Christine and I head down to the beach to climb aboard the Phantom Divers boat. Then it's off to the dive site on a beautiful sunny Mexico day. Before long, we've reached the dive site, and Charlie suits up in his stainless steel shark suit. He'll drop down a few minutes before the rest of us to get the chumming started in advance. This saves us some bottom time for filming. Now the rest of us get suited up and prepare to dive. As usual when diving with sharks, I cover up so I don't have much skin showing.
Well, let's go see some sharks.
I descend towards the bottom through crystal clear, warm water and eventually end up on a sandy seafloor at a depth of 80 feet. A stingray glides past. It can smell the fish Charlie brought down. Jorge takes over for Charlie and hand feeds the growing school of hungry mouths. I stay back a ways so I won't spook the sharks. I know it's hard to believe, but our scuba bubbles are loud and scary to sharks. It doesn't take long for the first couple of bull sharks to arrive, but they keep their distance, not sure what to expect from us. A few minutes later, they approach Jorge closer to see where that yummy smell is coming from. But they're not ready to trust him enough to take the fish from his hands. Even the stingray has managed to procure a snack from Jorge. I'm starting to think these sharks are wimps. At last, the first shark makes her move. She takes the fish right from Jorge's hand. The next shark actually misses the fish and doesn't have the maneuverability to turn around and get it, so she finally gives up and goes around again. Now that the sharks have figured out that we're not a threat, I can move a little closer to Jorge for filming and the sharks won't mind. Jorge's steel mesh gloves protect him from the shark's teeth just in case his fingers get too close to their mouths. The sharks have a voracious appetite. They keep eating until we're all out of fishy snacks. I can't help but notice how monstrous they are compared to a diver. Bull sharks might look like reef sharks, but they get a lot bigger. At last, we've reached our bottom time limit, and it's time to ascend towards the surface. While we do a safety decompression stop near the surface, the sharks come up to investigate. Clearly, they've overcome their apprehension about us. In fact, it kind of seems like they don't want us to go. Jorge has one last piece of fish, and he offers it to the sharks as a parting gift. At the end of an exciting dive like this, I can't help but be totally pumped.
Whoa! Those sharks are huge! I can't believe I'm gonna get a chance to feed them!
Later, back at the dive shop, I chat with Jorge and Charlie about what I'll be doing tomorrow, wearing the chainmail shark suit.
All right, so have you ever wear a chainmail before?
No, never.
Well, these things are very heavy. They're about 30 pounds, the full suit. So we're gonna put on the suit. It's very important that you put your boots over the suit, because if not, on the boat, it's super slippery and you can hurt your ankle like I did yesterday.
Okay,
So
it's
put
good
that
advice.
on, put the boots on, and then when we go in the water, it's very important that you put a lot of air in your BCD so you don't sink as a rock. Okay. When we get to the bottom, completely deflate that BCD, and I'm gonna start the feeding part, so the sharks get close to us, and once we get the action, I'll hand the chum bucket to you. Me and Charlie will be right behind you. You'll be fine, man.
I'll be fine. I'm gonna wear chainmail, man. That's gonna be so cool.
The next morning, we head back to the same dive site on another beautiful, flat, calm day. Boy, do I love diving in Mexico. Once again, Charlie gets in first with his container of bait to get the action started in advance, while I learn how to put on the chainmail. The chainmail suit is made of thousands of interlocking rings of stainless steel, which form a kind of fabric. It's super flexible, but the sharp teeth of a shark can't bite through it. Unfortunately, it weighs 30 pounds, so I'll sink like a rock when I hit the water if I'm not prepared. Jorge, of course, is diving with me, as is a shark biologist named Mauricio Padilla, who will be attempting to take a tissue sample from a shark.
1, 2, 3.
I sink rapidly down to the bottom in my 30-pound shark suit. When we arrive, Jorge hands me a piece of fish, and now it's my job to entice the sharks over. We were feeding yesterday, so it doesn't take them long to come on over. As I wave my piece of fish around, Mauricio is behind me, waiting for his chance to take his tissue sample. Soon, a big bull shark comes up and takes a close look at the piece of fish I'm offering. She likes what she sees because she makes another pass around and takes it gently from my hand. Jorge takes a turn next while I grab another piece of bait. Then I feed again, and the shark makes a nice close pass to a few other divers that are watching. The sharks are calm and relaxed, just like us. All this time, Mauricio's been hanging back, watching the sharks and making notes. He knows which shark he needs the tissue sample from, and now it's time to make his move. He has with him a spear gun, but instead of a spear, it has a special tip designed to grab a tiny sample of skin and muscle from a shark. The heavy chainmail makes my job really easy. I'm planted on the bottom. Mauricio has to be patient. The shark has to be really close because its skin is so tough. He has a camera mounted on the spear gun so he can identify the shark later. At last, the right shark comes close and Mauricio fires. The gun camera footage shows perfect aim. The tissue sample came right from the thick skin at the base of the dorsal fin. The shark absolutely feels a pinch, but the sample does not harm the animal, and in fact, she comes around and feeds again. Inside the tip of this instrument is a tiny sample of the shark's tissue that will be used to learn what these sharks normally feed upon and if they're interbreeding with other populations of bull sharks around the Caribbean. Later, I chat with Mauricio about his research projects. Bull sharks are only one of the species he's studying in Mexico. And then he shows me the tissue sample we got.
So this is the core, and we have, you can see the muscle. That's the red thing, that's the muscle.
Yep.
And also we have the skin. And we are gonna do two kind of analysis. With the skin, genetic analysis, in order to know if this population is related with other populations. And with the muscle, we are going to do an analysis that it's called stable isotope analysis. With that, you can know if the sharks, when they are here, are feeding on coronado or remoras or whatever.
So how many have you taken so far?
11.
11
11
That's
biopsies.
probably not enough to learn much yet.
No, we need at least 30.
Mauricio's sampling program, combined with some satellite tagging, is already shedding some light on the mysteries of the bull shark. And Jorge's hand feeding is helping to dispel some myths about these sharks.
Well, there you go. I fed the most dangerous sharks in the world. Man-eaters? What do you think? I don't think so. In fact, I had so much fun, I'm gonna go see them again.
Don't go away. Jonathan is about to go diving with some astronauts at NASA.
Blue world takes me on adventures all over the planet. Today's adventure takes me to the Johnson Space Center at NASA in Houston, Texas.
And I'm standing on the International Space Station!
Well, not exactly. I'm standing on an underwater full-size replica of the International Space Station in a gigantic indoor swimming pool. Here they train astronauts to work in zero gravity by simulating these conditions underwater. Outside, it just looks like a huge warehouse, but inside is the Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory, the NBL. I arrive early in the morning and meet Daniel Sadeh, the facility manager, who has arranged our visit.
Hey, Dan.
Good morning, Jonathan. Welcome to the NBL.
Thank you. I can't wait to see this place.
Let's come on in and get you all set up.
We drag all our gear inside and get our first glimpse of the NBL. This thing is huge, a swimming pool nearly the size of a football field. As we arrive, the morning mission briefing is just starting. The entire team, from astronauts to support divers to technicians, are all given a thorough run-through on the training exercises for the day. And cameraman Tim and I are part of this meeting, because they're going to let us dive in the NBL today with the astronauts. Our morning starts with a quick checkup. All divers in the NBL must pass a rigorous physical and a checkup before the dive. Cameraman Tim and I are no exception. We pass our checkup, and next we meet up with Sarah Williams, the dive training officer, who gives us a dive safety briefing.
The pool deck itself is also a functioning, working pool deck.
What to do and what not to do in the NBL.
So all divers need to comply with the direction of the dive supervisor. As I said, they are the supervisor on deck. Please give them a heads up when you're getting ready to get in the water so they know that they have someone to account for.
Just as we finish our briefing, the team is gathering on the deck to begin preparations for putting the astronauts in the water. Getting into a spacesuit is no easy feat. In fact, it might be easier in the zero gravity of orbit. But here on land, it takes assistance. The astronauts wear liquid-cooled underwear to keep them from overheating. That's what these tubes are for. The torso of the suit is clamped to a cage because it's too heavy to lift. Because this spacesuit is specially modified for underwater use and has a lot of lead weight in it. Climbing into the torso is a little tricky. It takes nearly an hour to suit up. The last thing to go on is the helmet. Underwater, a high oxygen blend of air will be fed to the astronauts through their umbilicals. Meanwhile, the safety divers are in the water getting ready. They wear double scuba tanks so they have enough air to stay down as long as necessary to complete the mission. Tim and I are getting ready too. I can't wait to see this enormous underwater facility. I descend into the clearest water I've ever seen, and it looks like an underwater movie set. The pool is a staggering 40 feet deep, and everywhere I look are full-size replica sections of the International Space Station. I take a few minutes to explore the pool. I can see from one end to the other very clearly, meaning that the underwater visibility is over 200 feet. I could spend a few hours just swimming around down here. It's like a playground for divers with all sorts of great structures to swim through. For the astronauts, now the moment of truth. A crane lifts them into the pool, wearing 300 pounds of spacesuit apiece. Underwater, the safety divers meet them and carefully remove them from the platform. Each astronaut is carefully weighted to be precisely neutrally buoyant. Hey, they don't call it the neutral buoyancy lab for nothing. Once weighted properly, the astronauts hover in the water as if floating in the weightlessness of space. Since fins don't work in space, the astronauts don't get to wear them here. They must be moved from task to task by the divers. The divers are also responsible for keeping a careful eye on everything happening. Each astronaut has 4 divers assigned to him or her. 2 are safety divers. Another has a camera with a cable going to the control room. And there are more cameras mounted all over the inside of the pool, too. In the test director room overlooking the pool, 21 monitors keep the staff informed of everything that happens below. They oversee the safety of the operation. If anything were to go wrong, the divers can get the astronaut to the surface in only seconds. In the test conductor room, another team is conducting the training run. The test conductor and team speak directly to the astronauts through the communications gear in their helmets. But powerful underwater speakers allow the divers to hear everything that's being said, even if they can't talk back.
Go ahead and swim EV1 over to Z1 to check out EV2's APFR ingressing.
The point of all this effort is to provide a learning environment for astronauts where they can practice tasks over and over in simulated zero gravity before they're required to do it by themselves in space. Tasks that are easy on land become much harder in zero gravity. And harder still while wearing a spacesuit that has to be able to protect an astronaut from the vacuum of space. A spacesuit is designed to have more pressure on the inside than on the outside, since it's effectively inflated like a balloon in space. Here in the NBL, that pressure is backwards. Water is definitely not a vacuum. In order to keep the water pressure from squishing the astronauts as they go deeper, the suits are inflated to a pressure just a few psi higher than the surrounding water. When an astronaut goes deeper into the pool, the water pressure pushes in on the suit and tries to compress it, so the suit is given more internal pressure to keep it inflated correctly. As the astronaut ascends towards the surface, the air inside the suit expands and tries to overinflate the suit, so some of the air is released. In this way, the suit always stays inflated just as it would be in space. After a couple hours of training, the divers move one of the astronauts over to the platform and remove her glove. This training exercise simulates a suit failure, and it's one of the things that astronauts practice underwater. The continuous flow of bubbles from the sleeve shows the regulator in the suit attempting to maintain positive pressure. Soon the astronaut is lifted from the water after a successful training mission. Tim and I head back to the surface too.
Woo! That is the coolest swimming pool ever.
Later, I have the opportunity to meet Ron Garin, a real astronaut. He has spent nearly half a year in space and more than 27 hours spacewalking. So you know what I had to ask him.
You gotta tell me what it's like to be in space.
What's it like to be in space? Well, it's a lot like being in the pool here. The only difference is when you turn upside down in the pool, you feel upside down. When you turn upside down in space, you don't. There is no upside down, so you don't feel that, have that sensation of blood rushing to your head, and you can't beat the view.
Yeah, I guess that's true, huh? What did you do here that helps you as an astronaut?
Well, what we do here is we train for our space walks, and you know, there's two ways to look at it. One is that when we were flying the shuttle, we had very, very specific, very choreographed spacewalks. And so for every hour that we spent outside in the vacuum of space, we spent about 7 hours underwater, making sure that we knew exactly how things were going to be. There's a full-scale mock-up, as you guys saw, there's a full-scale mock-up of the space station down there. So just to know how to get around, to know the lay of the land, if you will, know how the equipment works. But nowadays, since we don't have the space shuttles, what we're really training for is if something breaks. If we have a piece of equipment that breaks, then we have to go out and sometimes in a fairly expeditious manner to fix the equipment, and we never know what's going to break beforehand, so we have to kind of train a skill set, to learn the basic skills on how to fix anything that can go wrong outside.
I spent an hour chatting with Ron about being an astronaut and training underwater in the neutral buoyancy lab. I explained that I'm a perfect choice to join the space program. I mean, after all, I'm already good at working in zero gravity. But I don't think he was convinced. So, instead of joining the space program, the Blue World team ended our exciting day by getting our picture taken with Ron. Sometimes my adventures in the Blue World take me to fascinating places I'll never forget.